Okay, so now I think we are recording. So again, good afternoon, everyone. And today I will be presenting on what IUCN is, what nature-based solution means, what are the criteria for defining nature-based solution, and what is our experiences in the application of nature-based solution criteria globally in the context of urban planning. So that's why my title slide is mainstreaming nature-based solution in urban areas, criteria and learning. So briefly, this is a SEM-led, session. So I'm sure most of you are aware about what IUCN is, but it is a union of organization which was created in 1948, and it is one of the world's largest, oldest, and most diverse environmental organization. IUCN has been working with different global conventions, including CBD, Ramsar Convention, and also Jeff GCF agencies. Our strength, as you can see on the right side of the slide, is in our members. These are like organizations, state members, and also commission member, like the Commission on Ecosystem Management is one of the commissions. So within our, 6, 7 commissions, we have more than 15,000 experts who voluntarily support the work program of IUCN. And we have secretariat in more than 160 countries with almost 1,000 staff across the world. So now talking about a nature-based solution. So basically nature, if you think about the precursor of nature-based solution, it was used earlier in 2000. If you see the literature, you'll find the mention of ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. So this is how it started, and the nature-based solution as a concept was promoted by IUCN since early 2010, when it became part of the IUCN programmatic approach. And in 2016, a clear definition for a nature-based solution was accepted at the World Conservation Congress. So we'll go into that. And now UN has also, agreed to a definition of nature-based solution, which is a big, movement forward, since we need definition and criteria to avoid greenwashing linked to nature-based solution, and also to develop a common language for all the practitioners working on nature-based solution. So if we look at the concept, initially the focus was on safeguarding nature, and that's why every time we used to hear about conservation of biodiversity, protected area management, etc., etc. But to actually engage and work with different stakeholders, needed something which is more acceptable. And with time, this concept of nature-based solution developed, which is basically extending the conservation reach and its relevance to include societal challenges. So not conservation for the sake of conservation, but conservation for solving societal challenges. This is how the narrative changed from 2000 to now in last 2 decades. If we look at the definition of nature-based solutions, so as I said, the World Conservation Congress in 2016 first adopted a definition of nature-based solution. So if you look at the definition, it has different components. So first thing is actions. What actions we take, which can be qualified as nature-based solution. So first thing is that your action is directed towards protecting, sustainably managing, and restoring natural or modified ecosystem, which leads to solving a societal challenge and also enhance biodiversity and human well-being. So this is something we always need to keep in mind when we are designing something. Is our entry point to manage or restore nature, or we are just talking about a gray infrastructure solution? So as you can, this is an umbrella term, nature-based solution, and it includes a lot of different concepts: ecosystem restoration approaches, issue-specific ecosystem-related approaches, where ecosystem-based adaptation, eco-DRR are quite frequently used in the literature and practical application. Then infrastructure-related approach, green infrastructure, like if you talk about wetlands, they can be considered as a green infrastructure in a city context because of its different values in terms of buffering the floods, enhancing the biodiversity, maybe also creating alternative livelihood opportunities for the people who live near and depend on those wetlands. So all these approaches are within the overall concept of nature-based solution. And when we look at a landscape or cityscape level, generally, we will see in practice that more than one concept is in application. So here in the right-hand side in the infographic, you see a diagram without or infograph without any NBS application at the landscape level, mostly gray infrastructure solution being tried. But when we apply nature-based solution, it could mean different things in different part of a landscape or a river basin escape. So maybe forest landscape restoration in the hilly regions, agri-scape restoration, urban NBS. You must have heard about a sponge city concept, which is being proposed, which is being popularized by China and also kind of implemented by different countries across the Asia region. So basically what I want to emphasize here is that when we are thinking about nature-based solution, it is different approaches applied within a certain landscape context. So when we start thinking about nature-based solution, the first thing is that it is for addressing a societal challenge. Of course, it is the entry point here is restoring or managing an ecosystem, but for what? For solving a societal challenge. And the global standard identifies these 6-7 types of different societal challenge. And when we are thinking about designing an NBS, we should link our work with one or two of these societal challenge. But in any case, what we have seen from our experience and through the literature survey, we will find that even if we are designing a nature-based solution for, say, a food security reason, it will have contribution in terms of human well-being, reduce disaster, or enhancing the biodiversity. So talking about the scope of nature-based solutions, so through the definitions and different examples, you see that the scope of nature-based solution is very defined. It is about restoring or managing ecosystems. So there could be different types of solution, but they can't all be called a nature-based solution. So here you see 3 different examples: nature-derived solution, nature-inspired solution, and actual nature-based solution. So when we say derived solution, so one good example is the windmill, where you are using nature to extract energy from the flowing wind, but it is not actually any intervention which is contributing to enhancement of biodiversity, or it is not a intervention directed towards the management of the ecosystem. So this can be at best called as nature-derived solution. And then we see a lot of building design which are integrating indigenous and natural aspect to make it more energy efficient. So those kinds of examples in the city context can at best be called as nature-inspired solution, but not nature-based solution. So nature-based solution always will have an entry point in terms of ecosystem management linked to a societal challenge, which also contributes to biodiversity enhancement. So now, every time as a practitioner, we are looking at something that can guide us in a structured way to develop project proposals and programs on nature-based solutions. So IUCN Global Standard, which was published in 2000, is one of the most comprehensive guide. And now I understand that the CEM and IUCN team at headquarters is also working on translating these guidelines for the urban context and how it can be applied in the urban context. But already there are some case studies and analysis done globally, which provides us insights on how it can be applied and where the gaps are. So I will be going into these details, and you see a few publications here, which you can always refer to after this webinar. So towards a nature-based solutions at a scale, so some case studies from China, then we have case studies from the Mediterranean region, and recently a compendium of nature-based solution for urban resilience in Bangladesh was published jointly by IUCN and GCA. So this also integrates localized example of nature-based solutions, but not actually nature-based solution. When we analyze it, it is mostly examples which integrate some elements of nature-based solution. So when when we look at the criteria, there are 8 criteria which needs to be met for project or intervention to be qualified as nature-based solution. But in most cases, we see that either 2, 3, or 4 criteria is met. There is not information available on, say, criteria related to biodiversity net gain or trade-offs, etc., etc. So now going into because it's very difficult to cover these criterias in 15 or 10 minutes presentation, but just to give you an overview, and you can always go to Google, find the document, read in detail. So the 8 criteria, if you look at the entry point, the first criteria is most important, addressing the societal challenge. So this criteria is linked to many indicators, which actually guides the project manager or implementing agency in terms of how and why to engage the communities, and the need to identify the societal challenges while working closely with the community or the beneficiaries of the project. The second criteria is more about understanding the scale of implementation. Many times we see that a scale is very localized, but even in those cases, it is important to understand how this smaller area is interacting with the larger landscape. And here you see on the right side a small infographic from the global standard, which has like different, within a city. I mean, say if it is a city landscape, with a coastal city, it might have some hilly regions, it might have some areas upstream where the impact is happening. So if we are thinking of any intervention, or say there is a problem of siltation or erosion in the coastal area, we also need to understand that what kind of impact is coming from, say, location A or location B, and how we can manage, or at least we document it as one of the challenges, or what you say, like something that is beyond the control of project, or we try to manage those linkages. Then the third, fourth, and fifth is more linked to sustainable development goals about enhancing the biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. So we have always seen, especially in the context of urban area, which is generally characterized by a lot of infrastructure, flyovers, buildings, etc. And the construction of these many times doesn't integrate the ecosystem connection, or say wetland connectivity aspect. So what happens is that these actually disintegrate the connectivity and makes the ecosystem more vulnerable, and also decreasing the capacity of wetlands and rivers to actually contribute to the challenge that we are talking about, whether it's flood or then it is about economic viability. Yeah.
Sorry, Vishwa.
Yeah.
If you can just maybe, quickly.
Just 2 more slides. I'm finishing just 2 minutes. So anyway, so I'm not going into, but this is the criteria 5 is about inclusive, transparent, and empowering governance process. And 6 is more about understanding the true trade-offs at the city scale or basin scale. Say if you identify that for solving a flood issue in a certain area in the city, you need to rejuvenate or restore the wetlands, but then you need to look at who is the landowner of the wetland, what are the other uses that are planned for those areas, and then you need to understand that how those can be managed better through trade-off. And then it should, because we are not working in isolation and we are always working in a changing context. So the criteria 7 is more about adaptive management, data, creating evidence, and 8 is more aspirational, which is about how you learn, how you share the learnings from your project to affect change on the ground. So when we look at the application of these criteria in the urban initiatives, what we see is that the criteria 1 may, in most cases, the identification of the societal challenge is most where we find most information, and every time the trigger is the challenge that she's identified, leading to intervention, but no evidence actually on the trade-offs. So number 6. Overall, there is an infographic you see on the right from the Mediterranean case study example that I was referring to earlier. So reasonable amount of information was available for the criteria, especially criteria 1 and 2, less for 4 and 7, and effectively nothing for criteria 6, which is on trade-off. So this is the last slide. So let's look at where actually is the big gaps and where we need to invest to really enhance nature-based solution. So the review of like all the existing case studies and analysis indicates these 4 major challenges. Designing at a scale. So what we see is that most interventions, because city is also a very complex unit with different kinds of governments working in the same city limits. So this becomes a bit challenging sometimes to implement at a scale. What we see is mostly localized intervention, neighborhood-based intervention. Other important challenge that we see is economic feasibility, how we monetize the benefits of NVS versus the traditional interventions. And also sometimes what we see is that intervention which is proposed might not have real economic returns, or it is not very clearly visible, but still it is required. So what we shall do in those cases? Then consideration of the trade-offs, and this is time consuming and resource intensive. That's what is the feedback that we get from the stakeholder. But we also think that it is also linked to the localized nature of the most urban intervention that we come across. So what we need is a citywide planning, a framework, how this city is interacting with the outside, ecological features, whether it's a forest or a, river which is crossing or flowing along a city. And then adaptive management. So this criteria we felt like is really poorly integrated in most intervention. It requires data and on a regular basis. And also contributes to adaptive management. And a poor adaptive management also is reflected in the poor documentation of the biodiversity gains. So that's what is important, and that's where we need to invest to really mainstream nature-based solution. There are a lot of knowledge products, and I think this group is already aware about it. So you can go, there is IUCN Urban Toolbox, IUCN Urban Nature Index, which are being developed, and now global standard will also be developed. A global standard for nature-based solution in the city, building on the original standard, is under development and will be published at the World Conservation Congress. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vishwa. Yeah, I think the last 3 slides, especially the ones which you gave the reflections on, they were very helpful and really summarized it a bit for all of us. So maybe we can have the WRI coming in, and then we can have questions at the end for both. Yeah. Over to you, Deepti. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just start by sharing a screen. Deepti, did you want to give an introduction to WRI?
Hi. Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
all.
Hi everyone. I'm Deepti Tarpade, Program Lead, World Resources Institute. This is my colleague, Shruti Malivar.
Hi, I'm Shruti. I've been working with Deepti on nature-based solutions within Indian cities for the last 3 years. Over to you.
Yeah, and so World Resources Institute, for those who are not aware of the initiative. So we are a think and a do organization, and we work within the intersection of nature, people, and climate. This presentation today actually is more to kind of gather ideas on, and also reflection of what we have done, across the 3 years around nature-based solutions, primarily in Mumbai, but also, across different cities in India. But now we are at a stage where we are looking at, all the processes that we have followed, right from, looking at, prioritizing sites to actually, implementing the solutions, working with governments, finding out, ways to interact with different stakeholders, working with community. All those kind of learnings, we are trying to see if there is a city level framework that is possible. And that's why, I mean, from this meeting, we are also hoping that we have a lot of reflections on whether this is, the right way that we are kind of adopting, or, feedback on, the kind of pathway that we are choosing, and would like to really keep it our presentation very short. We've not been able to actually crunch everything together, but, really snippets of our work. So over to you, Shruti, just to kind of take them through the process.
Sure. So as Deepti mentioned, our work at WRI across India has been spanning across 3 pathways essentially to address blue-green goals for cities. The intention here has been to move from a beautification approach to a more scientific and ecological one. So for this, we've completed first practice project demonstrations. We've worked on pieces that influence policies as well as investments, as well as looked at what kind of processes can be developed to have more sort of inclusive and equitable access to the projects that we've been able to demonstrate on ground. All of our projects are actually also informed by database methods and climate risk assessments, such as through the Mumbai Climate Action Plan, which was launched in February of 2022, which has also provided a framework to prioritize wards and smaller districts to work within the city at large, and through which we're also able to prioritize communities that have increased exposure to climate risks such as heat and flood within the city. So by also overlaying these climate risks that are faced in the cities, we were able to identify places such as rehab and resettlement colonies like Lalubhai compound, as well as informal settlements that are more exposed to climate risks than other neighborhoods within the city. And our interventions are focused within these areas at large. Sites are largely within the neighborhoods that we've identified through the Mumbai Climate Action Plan and other guidelines, climate assessment guidelines. Our sites are identified further down through spatial mapping exercises and on-ground surveys, through which we're able to assess the feasibility of barren open spaces that are available for the implementation of nature-based solutions. By first understanding parameters such as, land ownership, what the surrounding land use is like, what the community needs are, and also what kind of resources are available to develop specific solutions for climate adaptation and social resilience. And this process is carried out with community groups as well as with students to be able to understand local priorities as well as log existing practices which are taking place within the city. Most recently, we carried out a mapathon exercise with students within colleges to be able to do an on-ground assessment of one specific ward in the city and identify the feasibility of developing nature-based solutions on sites in Mumbai. In terms of a visioning approach, due to a lack of basic services provisions and amenities in the areas that we work within, and also to make the most of the limited public spaces that are available within these neighborhoods, we have to adopt a more holistic approach. Here, nature-based solutions delivery also needs to address larger infrastructural priorities such as waste and water management, and also integrate programmatic needs for play and recreation that the community has into strategies that then can, enhance biodiversity and flood resilience. And this process therefore requires community engagement and stakeholder participation from the get-go across the NBS project cycle. An example of a completed project is this periphery plot that you see in the before and after images that have been included in the slide, which is within Lalubhai compound. That's an R&R rehab and resettlement colony in Mumbai. The intention of this project was to establish bottom-up approaches that to implement nature-based solutions in vulnerable neighborhoods in Mumbai. And we've completed 5 such sites in total in the city. And following implementation that was done in a very participatory bottom-up manner, through co-creation processes, through stakeholder engagement methods, and through programmatic interventions that helped us unlock the sites that we were working within. Our partners, Yuva, which is a social NGO, were also able to take this work forward. They recently hosted crowdfunding rounds to raise money to implement more such projects within rehab and resettlement colonies. And the intention has been to head towards a slow, more incremental transformation of the neighborhood at large. And to give you an example of another type of project which has recently been completed, this is the Marol Nature Conservancy Park, where WRI India supported the Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation and the Marol Industrial Estate. And we were able to transform a 9-acre urban forest through nature-based solutions such as eco-STPs along the edge of the Meethi River. So this was a very riverine ecosystem. It was conditions of this site were specific to a riverine ecosystem. And on the back of this project, what was interesting was that we were able to prepare a detailed project report for 2 surrounding plots along the Meethi River as well, So to look at really creating a more aggregated approach and pitch this to understand, what kind of investment options would be possible. And the larger intention, therefore, of this specific, these demonstration projects is to be able to scale similar solutions along different ecosystems in Mumbai.
Just a correction. So
Yes.
we've done the phase 1, which is the 2 acres. The phase 2 and 3 is still undergoing. So that's the drawing that is shown.
And now to speak about, from the demonstration projects, a lot of the actions that we completed on ground through stakeholder support and through community engagement processes have allowed us the ability to work on bigger strategic projects with government partners. So one example of that was the launch of a citizens greening handbook, through which we were able to share methods and information of where to really green within the city, whether depending on the size of the plot that you have. And we were able to share methods to really green these plots in an ecological manner, and also provide, resource support in terms of how citizens could connect and engage better with the government to be able to green along the plots. And finally, another way of aggregation is, of course, through more through processes through which we're able to institutionalize our approaches and work with governance at large. So the climate budget that we recently developed is an example of this, through which the government within their annual budget was able to identify climate resilient, climate specific activities and allocate budget towards these activities. And another is to really, enable and carry out more strategic partnerships. The Mangrove Coalition project that we're undertaking now is an example of this, through which we're able to assess socioeconomic benefits of mangroves and also examine ways through which we're able to actually incentivize communities that live along the edges of these ecosystem buffers to engage in restoration and conservation efforts at large. So this was just to give you an example of how the pilot projects that we've carried out, as well as the aggregation efforts, have really led to a city-scale dialogue at present with, our different partners and the stakeholders that we've been engaging with. And Deepi, over to you to take it ahead for the framework.
Yeah, so I mean, all these kind of, and I think these are the last 2 slides, but just to kind of sum it up, that all these engagements are kind of, we are trying to create like a portfolio of all the work that has been created so far with, through us and through our partners. And for that, we've been holding some workshops, conducting interviews, and trying to see how can we scale it up and what would that mean. And here, like you see on the right-hand side, there are these maps where we are kind of understand that if this was also to kind of become a part of the development plan at some point, like landscape strategy for the development plan, what would it look like? How do we, understand catchments within Mumbai? How do we look at green cover, biodiversity, and also how do you look community, participation at every kind of scale? So with these, with these ideas, there are actually 5 main kind of buckets that we put our work in. And this is where we actually wanted, more kind of thinking from partners. We've started to kind of speak around about this, but there are certain toolkits at each stage that we are, either developing or, have some sort of a template for, and would be helpful to then open for discussion in today's meeting.
Do you want to go to the discussion?
Yeah, I think that discussion is in the.
Yeah. Thanks, Deepti. Yeah. Maybe what you can do is, if that's okay, Shruti, can you just take a snapshot of this slide, this blue-green framework, and put it on the whiteboard, which Mika would be projecting now?
Sure.
Actually, I just took a screenshot. So let me just open up the whiteboard.
Yes. Thank you, Deepti and Shruti, to keep it short and very comprehensive. Yeah.
Sorry, I remembered just before doing this, should we take a group photo and then go into the discussions?
Yeah, sure.
We're testing how fast you can turn on your cameras and get ready for a photo.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's switch our cameras on for the photo.
Nice. I'm seeing lots of people. So the photo that we're taking will just be put in the newsletter without your names, unless your video shows your name instead of your photo. And this will be shared with our newsletter at the end of the session. So smile, everybody. Let me just make sure I have my things set up. Okay, smile. Yay, thank you. Once more, just in case things are okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Let's go on to our whiteboard discussion. I hope you can see the whiteboard.
Yes.
And anyone that's in this meeting right now can also access this whiteboard. I think you can move your cursor around, and if you'd like to put on a sticky note, the option for you is on the left-hand side. And we're just going to, oh, I just put a sticky, but I was gonna take the questions from, or put in the photo that I took a screenshot of. And as part of our discussion point for today about the blue-green framework. And if Anusha and Meherwan, if you can just fill in sort of 3 things that you remember about the presentation from Vishwa, just so everyone can also remember what was being said as a starting point for discussions.
Sorry, I was on mute. Maybe Deepti or Shruti, in terms of the first question that you guys have outlined, what do you feel about the city scale blue-green frameworks? Can you just tell us what kind of response do you want? Because this is quite open. So if there's something specific that you're asking.
Yeah. Sure. So,
Microphone, sorry.
Problem.
Sorry. So the idea is that this is, we just want to understand what, like, there are frameworks across. We've seen IUCN frameworks also. We've seen various global standards. So at a city level, if we have to make it more specific to a city like Mumbai,
Mm-hmm. Oh, we lost them.
Out as a tool, urban practitioners to kind of look at and, so what would be a purpose of a framework is more sort of a, answer that we are looking at. Is the imagination just ours that we need, need more sort of capacity within the city to build this, as a thing, or do we, or is it something beyond our imagination? We just are open to kind of take, more questions also or responses to this question.
So I just had a very quick comment to the what you guys presented in terms of your framework. So like you guys are developing toolkits is what you said for each step, like you identified A, B, C, D, E, which is there on the screen. So one thing that I wanted to flag was there are already some frameworks which are kind of measuring things like Urban Nature Index of IUCN. I'm just talking about IUCN, but there are quite others which are out there. So is there a reason why you guys are or developing new ones? Is that already thought of, or you guys are going to adopt some which are already out there? That was one thing that was coming to me very clearly. Because it's a lot of time and effort to develop new toolkits, and instead of experimenting with those which are already out there and piloting those and seeing what are the drawbacks from that, something like that. That was one thing that came to me.
Yeah. So this is again very specific to Mumbai, if you must have seen. And the kind of governance processes or the kind of work that you're able to do in Mumbai is quite restrictive. Or, there is no like a guidebook, or there is no sort of a way in which you can approach it. So even if the global standards and frameworks become very generic, how do we kind of make it more specific for Mumbai? Was our kind of attempt to build this framework.
Yeah. And the idea was also to have a common city scale framework where, different stakeholders can come and plug in sporadic efforts which are currently taking place in the city, because, you need aggregation, you need that sort of project preparation facility to be able to attract investments towards these projects. So how do you really have more of a consolidated effort, which is city specific, is what the intention of developing a city scale framework is.
So then are you guys looking at it as a lab sort of a thing, which will be, it will be an iterative thing, which will be a continuous process where you will be getting feedback from community. So is it like a prolonged approach that you guys are imagining for this?
Idea, Anushri. Thanks for contributing to it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, we are open to kind of, gather these ideas of what form it takes.
Mm,
Or whether it's a booklet, it's a document, it's a, something on the website, is it like what you're saying, like a lab or a place from which, this sort of interaction continues,
Yeah. The
iteratively.
one thing that I feel which is like a sort of a drawback from a toolkit, like a fixed thing which is like published with respect to a website, is that a website can be updated, and it doesn't take time, to get information in and out from there. But to have a booklet which is fixed and to update it, it takes a lot of time and effort. So maybe a graphical output in terms of a story or a narrative on your process, which could be like something which can be used by school, it could be used in colleges, it could be used by different stakeholders. That could be one thing that you can target for your communications. And website would be something that I see, at least from my opinion, would be a better way to consolidate things, or maybe create a data observatory. I don't know, something like that comes to my head.
Thanks for that.
Hi. So thank you, Dipti and WRI team. Basically, we have one urban NBS project in Thailand. It is a big budget project funded by IKI. And through other projects also, whether you are working at a city scale or a basin scale, I think the basic principles are the same. So when I look at your first number A, identify natural assets and map climate vulnerabilities. So when you are identifying, natural asset, it is about understanding the land uses. So generally what we do is we can share the experience, but I think here the entry point is generally we apply UNFCCC land use classification. That's what we use. And the first step is just the tool here is the GIS tool. And what you need to understand is that so you need to map the land uses and understand how these, so there is, I mean, you must have heard about or applied this, understanding the nature of changes in the city. So how the ecosystem has been changing over time, what kind of, connections broken, what is the impact. So that's where I feel that it will be general GIS tool for the number one. And for the climate change vulnerability also, UNFCCC has a vulnerability assessment methodology, indicators, everything developed. So just for the sake of harmonization, something, because UNFCCC, these land use classes and vulnerability assessment tools are quite accepted, so we use it. Also, you must have seen the DST report on the climate change impacts in India, which identifies the most impacted districts and all. So that actually also identifies and has a tool for vulnerability assessment. So I mean, that's what I'm saying, that this is not about one tool, but actually already established methodology that could be applied. Regarding opportunities for mapping and site prioritization, I think for this, I still feel, I mean, I'm not an expert, I would say, on the Rome, but Rome was a tool which was jointly developed by WRI and IUCN. And that actually gives you a methodology and the process of how you engage with the stakeholder to prioritize the sites. And that's where the input will be your analysis of the nature of changing land escape in the city, which actually contributes to your Rome identification and stakeholder analysis. So I'm just saying that, I mean, at the initial stage, I think these are the two tools that we use. And overall, I mean, we try, I understand that the criteria are a bit broad, but if you look at the criteria and go into the indicators, actually, you can use those elements, especially in terms of understanding the landscape level, socioeconomic. So there is those indicators. If you go, maybe, okay, you will see that, okay, criteria one, identifying the societal challenge. We already know what the societal challenge we have identified, but we want to understand how we go about the analysis of the trade-offs. And that's where the criteria 6, through its indicators, provides you the guidance on what is needed. So just these, couple of
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
Roam is a useful tool. Sorry.
Yeah. So Anushri, so thing is that, all these tools we are aware of, and also like, that they exist and the criteria have been, like, there are so many actually that can be referred to for each of this. So we don't want to recreate that. The idea is that if we were to apply it, what does it mean? How do we go ahead doing that? Who can do it? Who can
Mhm.
participate in this? Are they using the ones that are really, operational at the city level?
Mhm.
How do the governments come in, in
So,
this? So that
maybe,
operationalization is
Hanji.
something that, that is the way we see our problem statement as.
Okay.
And yes, I mean, we are aware of the toolkits. Also, Rome, that, again, Rome is, I think, made also for a
Forest.
larger scale. Here we are looking at MMR, which is also that way larger, but within that, again, within the MCGM. So, that those are the scales that we are looking at
Right.
in terms of governance. Yeah.
So one thing that comes to me, Deepti, like thanks for saying that, clarifying that for us, is that firstly, there are tools which are there, but maybe talking to those people who have developed those tools and in their experiences would be helpful for you guys as a first step. So for example, IUCN has applied Roam also in urban areas in some of the, I think, cities in Africa. This is what I know. So I think in Rwanda or some of those, the only thing with Rome is, I think what Vishwa was saying is that it is specific to a landscape typology, which is forest. But the process which they follow in terms of community engagement and getting the prioritizations in terms of the sites, I think that is something he was stressing on could be utilized in your toolkit, or you could adopt the same method or think about how they do. Because as such, Rome has different tools within it in terms of how can you do the cost benefit analysis, and there are some aspects to it. So those can be picked up for that. That's what I think he was trying to say. But I think it would be useful for you to connect with maybe IUCN in terms of how they've applied Rome or Urban Nature Index or some other tools, which maybe then you can pick up key, yeah, this might not work in Mumbai because of this. So we have to look at for some other tool. Maybe that could be a starting point for you guys. Just a thought. Yeah.
And,
Thanks.
and just one thing, like, I mean, in real, like, we are all practitioners here, and I'm working with Anushri also in Meghna Basin, how we can apply with the stakeholder. And the biggest challenge, first you go to and talk about NBS, people have different understanding. Okay, we went and planted some tree, this is nature-based solution. That's what we are trying to avoid, because nature-based solution is not about doing one thing at a site, but it is about understanding how things are interacting at the landscape level. And if you read the literature, like, on what is the biggest, limitation of implementing nature-based solution, and especially when you talk about city, it's where is the land, who is holding the land, who is managing the land, and that's where, I mean, we all know it, and everywhere, I mean, in the city context, you have, say, maybe there is a forest also, there is some, like, I know that wetlands area in, like, there is a Haur area in Bangladesh where there is Department of Environment, where there is Department of Land Use Planning, where there is Department of Finance, and everyone has, like, overlapping and sometimes conflicting mandate. And that's where I see, I mean, it's like when I see one point on joint visioning, I think this general thing, I mean, you know what the problems are. It's about bringing everyone together, and then you apply the same processes for consensus building that you do for other projects, and which is really tough. You will have all the people, but at the end, how we align or synergize between different, agencies is the big, and that's where I think we should be supporting the city planners and government agencies.
Totally agree. And I mean, even with those challenges, and right now we are actually here sitting at the UA office because we are, there are 2 other projects here being implemented within an informal settlement. And it's been like 2 years that it's gone to, this level of negotiation with different types of government agencies, the private builders, the society people itself over here, to then finally come to this solution and actually implement it. So we know that process, and we want to kind of document and be able to show that it is possible, even with the different land tenures. And I think that would probably be the strength of the this, I don't know what to call it, whether framework, guidebook, or what, but yeah.
Very true. Very true.
And
I think
also, I was realizing, and I'm sure you and others can add to it. When I see, okay, this framework that you're developing for Mumbai, or the work that you're doing, what is the main societal challenge that you are targeting? Basically, the way I feel is like, and that's what is the problem I see always. People, so now I like when people talk about integrated water resource management. Frankly, the principle, when you apply it at the basin level or when you apply it at the urban level, it will be the same. So, like, how to do it? And NBS provides you that kind of NBS, especially when we look at criteria, because if you have already identified that this stream of work that we are doing should lead to this solution of this societal challenge, then you can be more specific. Many times, people, okay, what is the nature-based solution for urban waste management? I don't think there is a nature-based solution for urban waste management. It is more about behavioral change. It is about circular economy. It is about lifestyle, which is peripheral to the, like, I mean, maybe when what you're planning, these things are important, but these are not the core.
I agree
So,
on the point that not all solutions can be nature-based solutions. At the end, we need different mechanisms. So maybe, Deepti, in your first step, which is identifying natural assets and mapping climate vulnerabilities, the societal priorities and what he's saying about societal challenges, what this framework is targeting should be made clear. That blue-green solutions are only for these types of issues. We can't target other issues within it. So, for example, the basic services and the whole sanitation issue that you guys have and other things. So those are parallel activities that need to go hand in hand with the nature-based solutions for it to become successful or to come in reality. I don't know if I'm making sense. So
Yeah.
the training.
So yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is a larger, conversation. But I mean, more often, and everyone who has worked in that sort of a context will realize that, for example, the waste management becomes a larger issue than planting a tree or creating, permeable services, and so I think it's systemic. I mean, that's how our experience tells us that it's really systemic, and we can't kind of say that this is core and this is peripheral. But
no,
that if you that if you have to look at developing nature-based solution as an objective such that it's beneficial in all different terms, then understanding these different systems is essential.
yeah, but it's still like when we are going for practical application, you need to have one motivation that, okay, this blue-green strategy is to solve flood, issue but one very important aspect which is emphasized for nature-based solution must be multiple benefits of nature-based solution. So when you are targeting, this is what we have learned, based on my experience, that you target one big societal challenge, but you can also track that how this will also contribute to other things. But say maybe if it is about pollution control is one, say, societal challenge or flood management, but to achieve that pollution, the garbage management is also one of the issue, which maybe is more linking to the idea of circular economy. So to achieve your societal challenge through NBS, you also need to apply the circular economy concept and create awareness among the people to generate less waste. I mean, this is how I see in practical terms.
Yes, absolutely.
I think the way we've also been looking at it is, to look at, say, urban greening or urban flooding as an entry point for nature-based solutions, but depending on the context where you're implementing the solution, and that's why, urban becomes a very unique context as opposed to a peri-urban or rural region. If I'm implementing this within, say, an informal settlement in Mumbai, there's conflicted jurisdictional challenges, there's no overarching monitoring body. Whereas that does exist for if I'm implementing a payment for ecosystem services model in like a peri-urban or rural area, right? So here it becomes challenging. And that's why we need to look at it from a systems perspective where, urban greening becomes an entry point, but you have to look at other issues of infrastructure provision. Who is the monitoring overarching governance body? How do we engage community groups to actually self-govern as well? And that's why I think urban becomes a unique context as opposed to, some like a river basin management scale. And that's why we're pushing for this specific framework as well from a very Mumbai perspective to see how different frameworks that have been developed. And, we learn from the IUCN frameworks as well. But how can they be adapted to Mumbai depending on the data, resources, and challenges that Mumbai specifically as a city faces, as a metropolitan city? So just to, bring it into that urban context a bit.
Great. I just had one question overall.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Anushri, I'm gonna pause you there and just do a time check. So we gotta wrap up soon. So go ahead, Anushri.
Yeah, the ABCDE, it's not in a chronological order, right? We have things happening at the same time, right? Yeah, just to be clear, because the governance and finance comes at the end, but it's parallel. So I agree with what Shruti said, and even what Deepti said and what Vishwa was talking about. I feel, yes, it is an entry point, but we need to be mindful and acknowledge that there are other issues, and this framework will only target this issue was what, just creating a sort of a scope so that it doesn't and going hand in hand with other frameworks which can help you in the other things or other priorities and other issues on the ground. Maybe that could be helpful to have this in binding in this framework, if you could include it somewhere or maybe put an arrow somewhere to show the systemic feedback system and all of those. So then it will become more, it won't be a linear thing and it will be more of a systemic thing, which you guys are also talking about. Yeah, that's it. That was my overall comment. Yeah.
This point, I see using urban NBS as an entry point. I think this doesn't clarify. I think identifying which societal challenge you want to solve. This is like very broad. Using urban NBS as an entry point, what does it mean? Nothing. So, I mean, Dipti, like just one thing I wanted to share when you were talking about infrastructure, that infrastructure we need to consider. But what I see is that if we have identified blue-green infrastructure for, say, water security or disaster risk reduction, then when we are looking, so we need that this is our objective for the NBS. Then when we are looking at infrastructure, we look at it from that perspective, at how it is making the blue-green system more vulnerable by more reasons. Otherwise, what will happen that it will be like livelihoods, it will be this, waste management, everything will kind of make it very complex.
It is complex.
That's the challenge.
But when you are applying, so I mean, I know that like
to,
the ICMOD is developing NBS for DRR, NBS for, say, financing, NBS for this and that. So people are also looking sectorally.
sorry, if we had somebody disturbing us. You said something about sectoral, Vishwa?
I'm just sharing that why sectoral, because I see that like you are trying to develop something very specific to urban area. I know that ICMOD is developing NBS guidelines for DRR mainstreaming, NBS guideline for livelihood enhancement in the mountain area. So that's what I'm saying, that every time the objective has to be there, linked with the NBS.
Happen, yeah, which I agree, and also kind of understand where is the scope. What is the scope of this? Yeah,
I
Okay,
think
great.
we can continue maybe in a few months again. When we've had a chance to kind of work further on the framework. And it'll be nice to have your inputs again, Vishwa, in a few months.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to discuss. I don't think I managed to capture all the discussions. I'm sorry, but we would like to take this discussion offline as well. I think a lot of the details could be discussed amongst those who are interested. But thank you all for your inputs. I think there's a question from Rohit directed to Vishwa. If that's something you could answer maybe just by text, I think that would be really great. And we'd like to just, unless there's burning something you really want to say as a closing, I'd like to close this discussion for today and thank everyone for taking part in sharing your thoughts and in going through sort of like all these different frameworks that we're talking about, right? And I just wanted to end by sharing a quick announcement about our next briefing, the next briefing date. Okay, we took our group photos. Our next briefing date is on Wednesday, Urban Wednesdays, continuing with our trend. It would be on June 25th, in about a month's time, at the same time. And our continuing with this theme of blue-green NBS, we are looking to share with you some examples of blue-green NBS in cities. And I think we've heard some very tantalizing examples today, but we will hear more at the next session. So we'll share the registration link to everyone through our newsletter at the end of the session. And before we close, I'd like to just ask if there's anybody at the briefing at this session who would like to make a quick short announcement on any of these topics, because this is something that we also would like our monthly briefings to cover. Announcements that's particular to the region for any events or funding opportunities that you know of, or any job announcements if your organization is hiring. Any takers for the floor? If there are none, going once, going twice. And thanks so much, everybody. We've gone well over our half-an-hour time slot. So thanks for sticking with us. We'll think about how we can be brief, but also provide you all with a great discussion platform for these important discussions. So we'll see you next month about blue-green NBS in cities.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
everybody.
much, Nika and Anushri, for hosting this, and also for allowing us a chance to, reflect. And Vishwa, thanks a lot for your reflections and
We'll be sharing the whiteboard with everybody. So don't worry about it. We have the whiteboard captured. Yeah.
Great,
Thank
great.
you very
Thanks so
much, and hope to
Yeah.
connect with
And
you.
also the recording will be useful just for us to hear something.
Definitely. On that note, let me just stop the recording since we've come to the end of our session.